What's going on, guys? It's Isaac Parks. You might know me as Isaac Punts on the internet, which is where we're at. And today we're gonna talk a little bit about something I've been going through. I used to call these punt dates back in the day, like little punting updates, just to kind of give you guys what I've been thinking about, what I've been working on. So today we're kind of bring that back on the second channel and talk about something I've been working on. It's a pretty easy concept, but I think it's lost on a lot of guys, and it's definitely not taken as seriously as it should, because what I've realized is it adds so much distance, so much hang time to every punt, and it's just your first step, okay? So your first step, your drive step, anything that's not a shuffle step, it's usually the step you take that gets you into your plant foot step, is the most important step of the punt. One thing that I've learned. Holy crap, so like when I've been playing around with it, it's just added so much distance, hang time. It's helped me with consistency once I mastered it. At first, it gets a little dicey, you gotta learn it, it's a different feel, but once you get it, it just feels so amazing. So the concept that I've been working on is pretty much how far and what angle that your club of your foot comes down on. So when I'm talking about the club of your leg, not the club of your foot, the club of your leg, I'm talking about everything from your knee to your foot. That's like the club, okay? That's the part where no more power can be generated past your knee, okay? Because that, you know, your ankle, you flipping your ankle up isn't gonna get you more power. That's like the last little piece, the last chain of the whip. So the club of your foot, the angle you take on that first step, it's gonna sound pretty basic, but it does a lot for you, is you pretty much want your knee to your foot to come down at no greater than a 90-degree angle, which sounds pretty basic, right? But there's a couple of different parts that come into it. So at a 90-degree angle, what that might look like is kind of like you're in a sprinter stance, okay? Your first step, you're pretty leveraged. You could try to keep your shoulders over your toes. I know Tai Long, just worked with him. He was a big chest over toes guy. Same concept, right? Shoulders, chest over your toes. What that means is you want to have leverage. You want to be here on your first step with all your momentum going downfield. One thing I noticed is guys that take that longer first step where as soon as that leg breaks 90%, now instead of it being a drive step that's gonna push me into my next step, it becomes a situation where I've got to pull, right? So opening that leg past 90 degrees is gonna activate that hamstring when you step, which is not what we want to do. Which means like now instead of me pushing into my step, I'm doing more of like a deadlift motion and pulling myself into my next step. And that's not what we want to be doing at all. That's gonna decrease the power, it's gonna decrease explosiveness, and for a lot of guys, it's gonna make it feel like you've got to do all your work on the back end. What I mean by that is it means that your first step, you're just doing it because you have to do it, build up a little bit of momentum, I guess. But then once you plant and swing, that's where you're gonna try to do 90% of your work, and that's just not very efficient. So by keeping your leg below like that 90-degree line, okay, you're gonna allow yourself to be more explosive, and it's gonna feel a lot better when you have your shoulders over your toes. You're not gonna feel as crunch. If I keep my shoulders over my toes and then take a really long step, I just feel like I'm crunching down, which isn't like the best feeling right before you punt. So it's not something we want to do. It's not something we want to replicate every single rep. So keeping it short and keeping it below 90 degrees is gonna help. Now, a couple key points that I want to add on here, because you can't just give somebody some information like this and not help out. First, we have to talk about how much power should we be generating off our first step. So the concept that I've kind of been working with, and you guys can kind of play around with it, is I like to think about it's like a ramping power levels, right? So when I'm taking my first step, the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm really pushing off my back foot, right? As I'm getting into that first step, I'm keeping it short. That back foot's gonna give me a little bit of momentum. Some guys do a shuffle step to sort of get into this. That's fine if that's what you wanna do. Similar thing, but it's just a very light step to get the ball rolling, so that way your first step doesn't have to do all the work. So what I like to think about is like 10% push, right? Very light little push off my back foot, just enough to kind of get it going. Then my right foot step, or my drive step, for me, if you're a lefty, it's gonna be a left foot step. I like to think about 25 to 30% power. Whoa, right? That might not be what you're thinking. You might have thought it's gotta be more than that, like really pushing 50% into it. No, because we just wanna be ramping. Remember, power is mass times acceleration, not mass times just pure velocity. So we don't actually want to be hitting our max speed off of our second step. We want to be ramping into a more powerful swing. So going, 25, 30% allows me to build into just this really clean two parts. One, it's gonna let me flip my hips, which is gonna get me a lot of power, and it's gonna let me just boom, feel like I can accelerate further when I get my plant foot down and drive my hips up through the ball. So now I'm going 5, 25 to 75%. You can play around with that power a little bit. I haven't crunched that exactly. We still kind of, it's a work in progress. We're still learning all the exact little tweaks and measurements and mindset things that I think about to make this perfect. But 5, 30, 75, kind of going in that ramping direction, allows you to build a lot of power when you get into your last swing. So some of the key notes that I like to think about, first of all, my first step, I try to keep it at or under a single yard. Now, a lot of you guys, if you're just standing there and you try to take a yard long step, you're like, oh yeah, that's really long, that should be no problem to keep it under that. And then the first thing you'll do is you'll step at a yard and some change. Okay, under a yard should not be a problem at all. The big thing is don't push too hard off your back foot. A lot of guys get into a rush, and they push really far off their back foot, now you're covering a yard and a half, or they get that club of their foot out, now you're covering, you know, a yard and a half again. So we wanna make sure that first step stays under a yard. After that, we wanna think about what is that drive step actually trying to do? Am I trying to cover ground, or am I just trying to push to flip my hips to get in a good body position? For me, I'm thinking I am pushing to flip my hips. That's a huge, huge distinction that you can have between pushing this way, where I'm just going straight downfield, and pushing where I'm trying to get my body in an upward position, right? So I'm still pushing, it's still creating power, still creating momentum, but if I'm pushing to open up my body position, now my plant's gonna be more effective. It's not gonna have to catch a bunch of downfield momentum, but it's just gonna have like this light little momentum that's pushing it up, and then your last step is gonna just take you straight to the moon, and you're gonna crush it, and all your momentum is gonna be used in the right way. You can see on a lot of the film that I took, plant foot never even leaves the ground. Part of that is I don't want to be creating a ton of downward momentum, right? The most efficient swing is gonna create a little bit of downward momentum, just enough for your plant foot to catch it and flip it into upward momentum, which is gonna launch that ball downfield. So that right there, those are some of the thoughts. How long is this right now? Should be a pretty quick one. Those are some of the thoughts that I had going into it. I hope you guys are doing all right. That's just kind of what I've been working on. It's a lot of rambling, a lot of not making sense. I'm hopefully gonna be putting some diagrams and stuff on the screen so it can make more sense to you. But we're gonna end on 2 punts because duh. I was hitting the ball pretty clean for some of those demonstration punts that I hit earlier. So we're gonna see how it looks right now. Let's just go for it, right? I was gonna tilt the camera down. You get what you get. Not bad. It's like 47, it's not a great ball. I made contact too high. Oh yeah, another thing, when you flip your hips, ooh, I failed it. There you go. When you flip your hips, you wanna try to be making sure you're trying to make contact low. One thing I've noticed, if you try to make contact high, you tend to like throw your leg downfield. You come out of that nice base that you just built by flipping them. So just stay low. It kind of keeps you in that base a little bit longer, so it makes it a more powerful swing without really having to try. Half turn, 45. Hope that helped. Hope you guys learned something. You know, it's probably gonna be a shorter video. Don't really care. Have an amazing day. Peace. That's 51.